Hi, this is your host, Swapnil Bhartia, and welcome to TFR Insights, a show where we deep dive into emerging technologies. And today we have with us Brian Glanz, Senior DevOps Evangelist at GitLab. Brian, it's great to have you on the show.
Swapnil, thank you so much for having me.
Though the initial discussion was going to be around 13.9 release, but I want to make it a bit broader because if I'm not wrong, some of the focus areas of this release is on security. So if you look at security in the cloud native world, it is no longer an afterthought. It is, shift left is happening. It is becoming part of a developer's pipeline. CI/CD is becoming a critical piece where they're trying to bring it more and more into that. So I want to understand from you that what kind of trends you have seen in this space towards security, towards shift left.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And I do think that, something like, let's just pick an exact example within 13.9. You've got an extension of fuzz testing, coverage guided fuzz testing with support for additional languages, JavaScript and Python, if my memory serves. But to your larger point, that sort of iterative approach from GitLab is the story more than what's in any one release, right? The story is that, yes, we've got fuzzing and it's integrated into that CI pipeline and that CD pipeline. It's right there in the developer's regular workflow. So fuzzing is a nice example in the sense that it's always valuable. When you fuzz test, you're going to find vulnerabilities you won't find otherwise, and using techniques that are typical of hackers who will find them otherwise, that sort of thing. So there's value there, but traditionally it's difficult for developers to do, and not to mention against every commit when you can automate it and run those scans in the merge request experience in the CI and dynamically in the CD pipelines. So making it easier for developers to do is where you really unlock that value. And that's the essence of DevSecOps. I mean, people obviously talk about shifting left. That's sort of the primary point here. You want to get your security as code into the same application to the greatest possible degree of where you're doing infrastructure as code, and yes, CI configuration as code, and your app dev. So there's value there, but to actually shift it left, to get it right into that workflow is where the magic sort of happens. It's where it's easier to identify the issue, which can be a problem otherwise, where it's easier to prevent it from becoming an incident, to mitigate on the spot, or if the developer or the reviewers okay it away, that vulnerability should still show up, and in GitLab does, in a security dashboard. So all those ramifications of DevSecOps in a singular DevOps platform are all the more powerful. It's almost like if you've got a tool chain with lots of point solutions integrated, you're not capable of doing that as completely and as effectively. You're almost not capable of getting that close to the sort of ideal of DevOps or ideal of DevSecOps as you can with a single platform. So that's why, yeah, it's interesting. What's in this exact release? Oh, it's a little bit better than the last one in all of these ways. But the larger point is, yes, this sort of difference in approach, instead of using all the point solutions and trying to integrate them, and how that actually enables DevSecOps.
I will get deeper into some of the core features and functionality, but I'll go back to the question that I was trying to ask you was that what kind of trend have you seen from, because as we were talking before this recording, your own experience, your own background, from the perspective of security, is there a shift in the, of course, we do talk about DevSecOps, but there are a lot of surveys that come out, but how many people are actually implementing all those things? We talk about zero trust, we talk. So what I want to understand from you, because nobody is closer to developers than GitLab and, company like that. So I want to understand from you, what kind of trend you have seen within companies, organizations, how are they looking at security? So that from that perspective, we will look at this release.
Right, and I think here's a trend that has been very relevant, which is not just the static and dynamic scanning of commits as they're made, but also scanning dependencies or also container network security, scanning containers. And in 13.9, for example, there's a feature, the security alert dashboard. And it comes into play, I'm thinking of my experience as a developer. In the early days of Agile, it was sort of like IT is where Agile went to die. When we were trying to implement, we tried the different ways of Agile and mixed them up and all of that in those earliest days. But we mitigated by doing a sort of proto DevOps, right? It comes to the point where, let's say you're a dev out there doing ops. You're frankly a little out of your depth already. You have information coming in from lots of monitoring tools and lots of like super verbose logs where the devil is in those details. So something like a security alert dashboard is a nice example of how you can resolve this. In this case, we're starting with container network policy alerts being piped in. And yeah, so in the heat of this incident management moment, you're a dev trying to do this part of your contribution, and you've got this blinking red light over here that says shut it down, and then over here the super verbose logs. And you might even have an index over those and be able to search them, but that doesn't necessarily make it easy to get the answer that you need in the moment that you need it. And what you're trying to make a call on is between downtime. I mean, few things are more expensive, or this type of insecurity. Few things are more expensive than that. Very tough call to make, right? So to get this surfaced in a really usable format is itself already valuable and in the same user experience where I can go and get that runbook. GitLab has Jupyter Notebook support. My runbooks are right there. Or I can reach out to those devs who are going to help me mitigate, all in the same UX. A lot of value right there. And just thinking of myself in those moments, I'm a human. I only have so much brain RAM. So actually reducing my context switching between lots of tools is also significantly of value. It helps me actually to troubleshoot and problem solve right there. Now, the security alert dashboard, and this is to another of your points, is an iteration, right? And people talk about minimally viable products or minimal viable functions, MVFs. And at GitLab, it's MVC, it's a minimal viable change. And that's sort of ideal from the days of lean, is I think only now possible or only recently possible in software. And DevOps has finally gotten us closer to that, where you can realistically ship things continuously, and if it's a little bit better, ship it, right? And so the MVC ideal is like, is it stable? And is it making anything better? Is it adding some value? Is it good for something? And if it's a little bit better, ship it. And the security alert dashboard is a fine example. Even those iterations on the fuzz testing, fine examples of where a lot of companies would hold back. They would develop these things in secret or in private for 6 months, 9 months, even longer. They would have a list of the 12 things they want in a security alert dashboard, and then they would say, well, we're going to get to 8 of those, and then release them for a big PR splash, right? And it's a sales and marketing kind of led decision. At GitLab, that's just so opposite the way that we do business. We believe in having these trustful, collaborative relationships with our customers and with our users of the free and open source version of GitLab. And they're all of them contributors. People even inside of our customers are employed full-time contributing to GitLab. And what this adds up to in terms of the iteration is that we just don't want to hold back progress, right? And so it takes a little getting used to. If you're new to GitLab or looking into it, it might strike you as funny at first, but it's key to know that what's in any one version is an iteration. It is an MVC, a minimally viable change. And we're putting it out there as soon as it's good for something. And so this security alert dashboard, like I was describing, for the people who need it, it's actually really powerful and important. Even as we have a lot more planned for that dashboard, we put it in the headline of the release blog post for this particular release. Similarly, with support for Dora Metrics, that's something that we started rolling out by convention, meaning it's baked into the product and just works when you use it and turn it on. It's right there in a CI/CD dashboard that you'll ultimately get these Dora for, right? I think I've got Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, and Gene Kim's book, Accelerate, right over my shoulder here, and I refer to it often, the science of DevOps. And to get those things instrumented by default is obviously super powerful in terms of getting the ROI out of your DevOps and knowing where you stand on your maturity there. You can get there from here already, but in 13.8, we put it in the headline, support for Dora Metrics. We started with deployment frequency of the four big ones there, the needles that really are important to watch. And in 13.9, yes, there is additional support for Dora metrics and constituent metrics like mean time to merge on merge requests and things where you want to look for those bottlenecks in terms of improving your Dora 4. But getting there from here is on the roadmap. And at GitLab, that roadmap is all out there. It's not only the matter of being transparent, it's also the matter of being open in that regard. So the proprietary tiers of the product are source available. It's an open core company. Most of what's in GitLab is actually in the free and open source version. And that affordability, that adaptability is key. But in terms of the Dora 4 and the roadmap for the security alert dashboard and all of these things that, yeah, there's a little bit here in this month and a little bit there in that month, what really matters, and going back to the customer experience and the collaborative aspect of that, is that you can jump in there and vote on those and help change our priority in what we do. You can contribute. And people do even at those proprietary tiers because it's source available, because they can. And as a developer, I'll speak from the heart for a moment. It's critical to me to use open source tooling. It distinguishes me as a professional from amateurs, essentially. This is my domain. I'm not just a consumer here. If I need to improve my tooling in some way, I just want to fix something that's broken or it needs to be more performant, I need to be able to jump in there and have that access to do that as a part of being a professional developer. And so on all of these features, not only can you get in there and actually contribute code, but even something like an informed opinion, a very welcome contribution. And as far as the trending on all of this, I think the trend is very much toward this kind of experience. We see lots of others in the market doing similar things, but because they're not fundamentally open source or because they're not fundamentally one platform, they're lacking some of those fundamentals that actually unlock all of this collaboration and all of this power and the user and customer experience.
Now, if I ask you that, though you have kind of alluded to a lot of those points, but if I ask you that this release is already here, and of course, as you are already saying that there will be 3.10, 11, 12, 13, 14. If I ask you to just summarize quickly in, let's say, elevator pitch that, what are the core focus areas? You already mentioned dashboards and other things, but if I ask you, what are the core focus areas for this release, which will also help us in understanding the trajectory of GitLab releases, focus around security?
Yeah, that's right. So one of the core focus areas is on being able to operate at scale. Something like the security alert dashboard is a fine example of that, but another example that's in this particular release, 13.9, is maintenance mode. It's already possible to upgrade a self-managed instance of GitLab without downtime, but downtime being so expensive, maintenance mode allows you to do additional sorts of admin tasks. Maybe you want to test failovers and to put your instance into a read-only state so people can continue working while you do so. There are also quite a few things in there that help you to mitigate complexity in CI and CD. When you have support, as we do, for parent-child pipelines, multi-project pipelines, multiple generations thereof, the visualization of those, the editing of those, the unpacking of how you've included one piece of a configuration from here and lots of other places can be pretty complicated. And so even if you're an advanced user of CI and CD, it's really valuable to have these additional visualization features. As far as the trajectory overall, that ties into like a really rich vein that we've tapped has been on user experience over the past year, but there's a lot planned for the year ahead as well. And it starts with something like you want to improve the efficiency of the merge request experience. And what you find yourself doing when you add a feature like in 13.9 specifically, you can more easily request a follow-up review. So it's been reviewed, you made some changes accordingly, now you need a follow-up review. It's the kind of thing where in terms of your workflow, you could do it already, but it wasn't super easy. There was a little bump in the road, or you were working around something and just naturally flowing around it, maybe not even aware that it was there. So we do lots of interviews with users and we watch lots of data and we identify these UX improvements we can make to remove bottlenecks. So in terms of improving the user experience, you go in there to improve the efficiency of something like your experience in merge requests and getting a follow-up review from a reviewer. So they've reviewed it, you've made changes, and now you need a follow-up review. We improve that little bit of the user experience, making it more efficient, but then there are additional effects unlocked there, like it makes compliance easier. It makes visibility better because we get more data on that area of the product. So we've made a lot of changes thinking UX first and found them to just have additional powers. And as a result, we've got this theme that we've been working on, and I don't imagine us stopping working on it. We have a lot planned in terms of user experience, which does map to what's specifically in any one version. But as you know, and maybe your viewers would know as well, there's a new version of GitLab every single month, right? So it's all about that iteration. And it's on the 22nd day of every single month for now 113 consecutive months. So all the way back to those open source project roots, years before there was a company called GitLab, when it was just that community project. And through all of that growth and all of that change, that incredibly regular heartbeat, it's a kind of reliability that you can only get really when you're doing DevOps right, frankly.
Right. One thing that I also want to ask, and as you were talking earlier, that CI/CD is kind of becoming even more important developers or DevOps or DevSecOps pipeline. As you add these capabilities to CI/CD, whether it's security or other application, what kind of direct impact it has on developers, DevOps or DevSecOps, whoever you want to call it. And now we are also talking SREs, live directly to make it even things easier for them, because things are already too complicated in the cloud-native world.
That's so true, Swapnil. It is already super complex for a lot of folks. And the ability to edit a pipeline in YAML, to configure things just exactly the way you want, to have multiple generations of parent-child pipelines and multi-project pipelines. And, we've got a new function in this exact version 13.9 to enable including just a part of a configuration, even from another file in any other configuration. That's great. It also leads to a level of complexity that is difficult regardless of your experience level. It's not about how technical you are or how experienced you are in this regard. It's just you're a human, and this is hard to visualize. So back in 13.8, for example, we actually introduced a pipeline editor. We introduced and are continuing to iterate on better visualizations of all of these complexities to help unpack them. And I think in the end, if you can edit these things even without jumping into the code, all the better. And it's not about whether you're capable or interested in doing so. It's about sometimes just the efficiency of that. And so I think ultimately, people talk in DevSecOps a lot about devs doing ops and devs doing sec, but also security professionals doing dev, right? And also operations professionals doing infrastructure as code and security as code. And for them being able to more easily edit in CI and CD as well requires these kinds of features because it's not the area in which they're as familiar. It's not their everyday work. So I think realizing the shifting left and the shifting right is part of making DevSecOps really work. And CI/CD, that's almost like DevOps right there in many regards. That's where a lot of that rubber is hitting the road. That's where a lot of our improvements are focused in recent times, as well as in the near future for GitLab. Application security testing especially is an area where we have a lot planned. There's a lot in yes, this exact release, but lately and planned there, not only for scanning your app code, but for scanning dependencies, for scanning containers, for fuzz testing, for lots of things that are ultimately essential to make easier and to make more automated for developers and for everyone in DevSecOps.
Brian, thank you so much for not only talking about this particular release, but you also kind of went deeper into explaining, what GitLab does to most of our audience. And I have been not only following, I'm a huge fan of the work that GitLab, especially the way Sid has created the company. So thanks for taking us on that journey as well. But I would love to have you again on the show. So thank you, and look forward to seeing you again.
Swapnil, it's been a pleasure. And everyone can contribute to GitLab. That means you too. Not only code, but just an informed opinion like yours. So jump in there. Thanks for having me.